Officially, it's BARBQ. That's right. It's not in our purview. We'll adopt the guidelines for the BARBQ.
Guideline one.
No talking about BARBQ.
I was gonna say no prophesizing about how busy it is. Being grass, that's even better.
There, but not in that place. Yeah, I see.
Hey, Valerie? Yeah, it used to be, yeah, sorry. With the pre-meeting, you could, I haven't thought about it in so long. It's been, but yeah,
Yeah, that's why I was here.
so yes, we can, you just don't have to listen to us chewing. But, yeah, it's not closed.
But I wasn't here.
I know, I think it's like, no one's ever come into one, but, we could touch base about, if you have any questions about it, I could fill in the blanks. Launching my meeting and then it'll be online. So now I can share my screen if I have to. And you have as well. Right, did I give you a cheat sheet that,
I have this is an agenda. Is that the right one?
with the motions on it?
Yes.
Okay. You're good
Yes.
there.
You ready? Okay. Welcome everyone to the regular monthly meeting of the Charlottesville Board of Architectural Review. We don't have a huge number of items, but when we get to them, staff will introduce each item, followed by the applicant's presentation, which should not exceed 10 minutes, then ask for questions from the public, followed by questions from the BAR. After questions are closed, we'll ask for comments from the public. And members of the public are each allowed 3 minutes to ask for questions and 3 minutes to offer comments. Please speak into the microphone, since that's how we're heard online, and identify yourselves and provide your address. Comments should be limited to the BAR's purview, that is regarding the exterior aspects of the project. Following our discussion and before we take action, we'll see if the applicant would like to have up to 3 minutes to respond. Tonight, the first item on the agenda is matters from the public that are not on the agenda, or any comment on the items that are on the consent agenda. And a preview of the consent agenda includes number 1, approval of meeting minutes for November 15th, December 20th of 2022, January 18th, and February 22nd of 2023. Second item on consent agenda is 800 East Market Street. This third item on the consent agenda is a SUP recommendation for 218 West Market Street. The fourth item on the consent agenda is a certificate of appropriateness for 506 Park Street. Are there any members of the public that would have something to speak on, not on the agenda or on any of those consent agenda items? No attendees? Okay. So, moving to that aforementioned consent agenda, do I hear a motion or any comment on any of the items on the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Nope. Okay. Well, for any of you that might be here for projects on the consent agenda, you're free to proceed. You have the evening in front of you. You're also welcome to stay and have fun with us. That brings us to we do not have any deferred items, so our first new item on the agenda is a certificate of appropriate application for 810 West Main Street. That is the train station.
So, I'll just introduce this, and Kurt's here, can get into the details, but this a CO 810 West Main Street, which is the train station on West Main, was built in 1885. It is a contributing structure in the West Main Street 80C district, and the request is to construct a rooftop canopy on the, I believe it's the southwest side. Staff didn't see any issues with this, but it was, I think because we wanted to have something on the agenda. I think that, what do we say in here? BAR should discuss how the canopy addition will adjoin the existing structure, and just sort of some of the details of incorporating it into, you know, the existing. When I first looked at drawings, trying to determine that elevation of, there's the, no, this is hers, but there's the mechanical structure to the, on the elevation here on the left, just to the right of the main building is there's a mechanical structure that was constructed later, and then this will be added to it. So I was trying to figure out exactly how that all fit together, but otherwise, I don't have any issues with it. And you have any questions for me? Then I'll turn it over to Kurt.
Thank you. I'm Kurt Kiesecker, principal of BRW Architects, located about a block away. Sorry about that. At 112 4th Street Northeast. And happy to present our design ideas for the addition for a roof canopy over an existing dining deck at the train station. As probably all of you know and remember, this was a outdoor dining space that had been informally covered with a variety of either wood or tent-like structures kind of haphazardly in the past. And so the building owner has decided to make that covering more permanent to essentially enliven and extend the season that restaurant use, future restaurant use, could animate the urban space. Our response to that request is to do a couple of things, and there were some limitations working with the existing building that we kind of had to think about. Obviously, we wanted to follow the guidelines and make the new roof canopy different from the historic architecture, so we kind of are using exposed steel that's painted and a polycarbonate panel system very similar to the one that's on Little Star, and I'm sorry I can't remember the name of the new restaurant at Little Star location on West Main, but they changed their name recently.
Black Cow Chop House.
That's it. Thank you. And so same polycarbonate system, different color for the painted steel. So the material choices were related to simplicity and kind of expression of that and industrial kind of utilitarian setting. We decided to align the columns. The placement of the vertical columns is determined by a series of columns that are actually on the lower level that were added some time ago when the floor of this roof area was kind of rebuilt and made more solid. And so our engineer, we had asked that we could try to avoid X-bracing on this roof canopy structure, and to do that, we needed to align our new columns with the columns that are down below, so they'll go into the foundation, and then we're going to use kind of moment frames or moment connections at the beams and columns to make rigid connections. That holds well for three of the three column locations that you see, and also I should note that our new columns go behind the existing parapet walls, so there's no structural interruption there on the exterior of the facade. But our connection that Jeff had mentioned or Mr. Werner had mentioned in the report to the existing building is a connection that allows us to get some stability to the roof structure. That connection needs to occur where the framing for that mechanical area that he mentioned is located, and the framing for the mechanical area, which is a new addition to the original cargo area here, or warehouse area. Our structure aligns with the framing, and then a parapet goes up from that to kind of conceal the existing mechanical that's not part of our space. So that mechanical area is existing. I think other notable pieces are that we have slightly sloped the canopy. It's higher on the parking lot side of the building, slightly lower on the rear track. I think that's the east-west track. Routes that will tie into roughly existing locations. And we did suggest moving the stair for a couple of reasons. One, the existing stair location is technically too close to the other exit back into the building to kind of count as a second means of egress. So to kind of have a more distinct and different second means of egress, it's better to have that stair further away from the other door. It also, there's a little wedge space between this building and an off-property CSX-owned kind of utilitarian building, so we thought it would be a nice place to sneak that stair in. And then we can open up the rear facade toward the tracks. The rear facade has a big fume hood existing piece of equipment that's there and some other mechanicals, so I'm not going to claim that facade is historic or beautiful, but the existing stair location covers up the door and kind of an archway, and so we think by moving to this blank end of the building it'll be a little more suitable. It's hard to tell from our renderings and maybe hard to tell from our photos, but this entire part of the building is painted brick existing. You may have already known that, and so we think the repair to the existing canopy, we can reuse some of the railing, kind of just moving the pieces. So the coping piece and the railing that was original to the build out, we'll just take from where we want to make our new opening and bring it back. It's kind of a little bit of a flip around infill and then repaint to match. Other than that, I think the only thing that's notable is that we've got all our lights, some fans probably, and some heaters to extend the seasons into the shoulders under the canopy, and they hang from purlins that will be built to conceal the conduits for all those pieces. So what we're trying to do is not make that a cluttered mess of electrical conduit. And I think that's all I can add to Jeff's report, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kiesacker.
Yes, sir.
I wonder if there are any questions first from the public. If we still no attendees. Questions from the board?
I've got a question about the stair.
Yes, sir.
So you're moving the existing stair.
We are.
That's not the primary stair to get to upstairs, or is it?
It is not. There's an interior stair that leads to dining space inside on the second level. So it's the secondary exit.
Does it not need a landing?
I think it does have a landing at the top.
At the bottom, I think it'll connect to the sidewalk in the rear area. Oh, it may be cut off a little bit, I'm sorry. That graphic's a little bit strange, but, oh, you mean in terms of how high it
Yeah,
is?
the 13-foot height,
Well,
and I don't know if because it's an existing stair, if that's.
yeah, I think it's okay. I should check the dimension, but, yeah, we had planned on moving it, so I think it conforms now. It's a little deceiving how tall it is because the parapet wall is obviously taller. But we'll check that. I know the building code official will check it. Thank you.
The purlins that are gonna have the conduit running through it, those are steel tubes, custom steel shapes? or-
We're actually thinking about using two angles that kind of will be able to change, and that's how we're gonna be able to get the slope on the roof as well. So we're building in a little bit of adjustment with, yeah, I shouldn't be using it, but, is that right? Yeah, so they'll kind of slide up and down. And that'll let us make our holes where we wanna make them, and they're only there to support that polycarbonate panel that needs support about every 2 feet to 30 inches, 32 inches. So they're not structurally significant, so I think we can pull that off.
And that's a translucent? white?
Translucent panel.
Yeah.
It'll, I wish I had a sample. I realized that didn't bring one, but it is exactly the same material as used on the Little Star building, so it'll let light in, but it has, it's not clear.
It's diffuse.
It's
yeah.
diffuse.
Yeah.
And
But it's not white. Is it white or is it?
It is white.
Yeah, okay.
And it will hopefully have a little glow in the evenings when we turn the lights on, just kind of by default, but it is hoped that it will provide a little bit of shade, just like the one on West Main does, to in the summer months.
Yeah.
Because I think that's been part of the problem. This space is
Yes. You'll need it there.
It's hot.
Yeah. I wanted to just clarify something about the slope, just to make sure I'm reading the drawings correctly. It reads to me like the roof edge on the let's call it the north facade is level,
That's correct.
and on the south facade is level.
Yes.
It's sloping evenly towards the tracks,
That's
right?
right.
Okay.
Yes. At a very low slope, but the manufacturer should have looked at it, but I think it's it's a half an inch per foot or something.
I think the west elevation shows it pretty well.
Did I call it out? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. The only other question that I had was about the lighting, because this was a point of discussion with Little Star, that where initially they proposed some lighting that had was LED and full color range, and I want to just understand a little bit more about the lighting intentions, and I don't know if there's any lighting in terms of the kind of light, because obviously a white surface like this could turn into quite a feature.
Yeah, we haven't specified the lights exactly. We know they're probably going to be linear and they will be LEDs. We were going to do full cutoffs to have all the light go down, and by glow I mean it's probably only off the kind of reflected light from the tables and such that are below, just in general. But we're not going to shine lights toward the roof canopy from underneath. And I'm happy to bring the light choice back. If that's something that the board would like to see, we're happy to work with you on that, but I don't have that selection right now.
Is there any opportunity to relocate some of the mechanical units that are kind of on the north side, that are adjacent to where you're moving the stair to, that are kind of visible in the front?
All those are serving the tenant space that is unoccupied now, so there's no fit-out plan specifically for the future restaurant use. I think so yes, maybe, depending on how they need their service to be provided in the future, and I think we'd have to come back to you for that. The sequence of events for the owner was to try to create an amenity space that would help attract a tenant to the restaurant space, and then have the restaurant go through a series of approvals as needed. There are some things that exist in front of this building, like a concealing fence around one of the doors and all kinds of miscellaneous knickknacks that are kind of attached to the building. And so once they decide what their final approval, improvement plan is, I think they'd probably have to revisit. But we haven't gone that far yet because that tenant's unknown.
Any other questions from the board? Comments from the public? Probably not. Comments from the board?
Seems perfectly fitting with our guidelines. Looks like it'll be a nice project.
Thank you.
Yeah, we discussed this previously. I mean, it's a really nice, quiet insertion here. So, like using the railings over top of the parapet, I think is a nice idea.
Mhm. Thank you.
Would anybody like to make a motion?
Gets to it first.
Does anybody feel strongly about making any further conditions related to the lighting?
Maybe just ensuring that it's downlighting.
Yeah.
Jeff, that'll be fine if we have them submit that for the record, the lighting, that the lighting is consistent with our standards.
Say that again, you have to.
The lighting, any lighting for the exterior lighting for the project be submitted for the record and should be as described in this meeting as shielded and downlighting.
Yeah, fully shielded, full cutoff,
Mhm.
and then the dimmable,
Hmm.
the 3000K, and the CRI, not less than 80, preferably not less than 90. So,
Give it a try. Having considered the standards set forth in the city code, including the ADC district design guidelines, I move to find that the proposed patio canopy at 810 West Main Street satisfies the BAR's criteria and is compatible with this property and other properties in the downtown ADC district, and that the BAR approves the application as submitted. This is the downtown ADC district?
no.
And
This
the
is,
West Main AD.
West Main, yeah.
ADC district. With the following condition, the lighting shall be full cutoff, as described in the applicant's presentation, shall be dimmable, shall have a CRI of 3,000 or less.
Color temperature.
Color temperature, thank you. Wow. Color temperature of 3,000 or less, and a CRI of at least 80, at least
Not-
90?
Not less than 80.
Not less than 80.
Preferably not.
90 or more.
Great.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions?
Thank you.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks. Yeah, sorry, I see where, yeah, I got the West Main and the denial, but we didn't get to that. I also remember why, sorry, I've been, the last 4 days, helping my daughter move up in Annapolis, and I'm ready to fall over. So my focus is limited. But the fact that I know you all had talked with Kurt about this would have been some development, and so that was one of the reasons why, the fact that there had been those discussions, it's appropriate to then have the discussion instead of putting it onto the consent agenda. The next on the agenda, and I just wanted to answer Ms. Long's question. She had asked me about our preliminary discussions open, and yes, they always have been. I could think I haven't thought about it in so long, but You recall, we used to meet in the neighborhood development conference room, and yeah, it's open to the public, and I think just to maybe to help with what we discussed in there, just from my quick notes, you all can add, is asked if there are any questions on the consent agenda, anyone's going to pull anything, and wait, did Valerie leave?
She did.
Oh, she did. Well, then, I'll still can say it. We talked about why, because of some of the BAR members hadn't reviewed a special use permit request before, the recommendation, what we, how the BAR approaches those things, just kind of a quick talk about that. I mentioned that the zoning rewrite for the city is continuing, and we're getting into the details about, evaluating how the BAR's guidelines, criteria, and that intersection with what's required or allowed in the zoning ordinance. So we're getting into the details, talked about, that analysis and some of the things we're trying to anticipate. And on 104 Stadium Road, just mentioned that the hearing will be on May 15th. That'll be the appeal with council. And primarily the discussion is about the IPP designation, and that an IPP is not, being on the National Register or being eligible for the National Register is not a requirement for being designated locally as an individually protected property. And so just the importance of, while we do refer to the National Register criteria, that is not the deciding factor. And the concern that we just not, that we don't look at IPPs that are not on the National Register as disposable when it comes to other projects. So that was, and then there was the other question about the vacant lot next to 104 Stadium Road, and really that's not relevant to the IPP, and so I'm not focusing on that in my appeal. So that was generally what was discussed in that meeting. So unless you all had any. So the next thing I wanted to take a little bit of time tonight to go through some sort of BAR 101 on a couple things, and to take care of some housekeeping. For one, I will ask, well, I can ask this one up front because it's a simple one, but I've had 2 requests in the last week about over at the university fraternity house area, putting in artificial turf instead of grass. To both I said no, not in the front yard at least. And but not really anything in the guidelines. I couldn't really find anything that said no artificial turf. But I think it's reasonable to say that that's not something we would want visible from the public right-of-way. That seems to be an anathema to sort of what we're trying to achieve. But I was going to ask you all any opinions about that.
May I express an opinion?
Yes.
I drive down Rugby Road twice a week at least, and there's nothing but dirt in the front of those those fraternity house yards. And I don't know what would be better, but we can't require them to not walk around on the grass. I'm not sure I completely agree. There may be some other solution that you architects may come up with, but it's really not an attractive look the way it is now. And you can't, have the beer pong tables taken away, the soft furniture removed, all those other wonderful items that make the historic district look lovely.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, it seems like, I know it depends on the product, but, I mean, there are high-end neighborhoods that do this out west. I'm a little grossed out by it. I mean, the idea of that grass is, I guess it'll get rained on and the sun will get on it, but for some odd reason, the idea of growing grass seems like it would, I don't know, just, fraternity brothers are gross. But
No.
I'm not sure, I kind of agree with Roger on this one, or, yeah. Ron.
Sorry.
Sorry, I've had a weekend. My brain is obviously not working. Yeah.
I guess I can offer, in a recent project that the university, and where we did install artificial turf in an event space, certainly located in the backyard of a National Historic property. It's not in the front yard, but it was subject to DHR review, et cetera, et cetera. So, that's a circumstance where the university's done that recently. And I see Ron's point. It's what's worse, just dirt and solo cups or fake grass. I mean, yeah, up to the fraternity gods to see if it can hold up.
Yeah.
Are there no products that look better than what I recall as AstroTurf or anything like? I honestly
Yes.
don't
They've got
know.
really
It has
good-
changed
They've
quite
got
a
lots of
bit.
good products, and if it's, I mean, right, landscape architects should certainly chime in, but if the correct base is put down, then they do drain. It's
Yes.
not like putting a green tarp on your front lawn that just the beer runs off of.
Yes. Yes, it has gotten a lot better. And in the right location, I've certainly come around to it. It's definitely still makes me queasy. On the other hand, I think it'd be a little bit of how are they using it? Is this like an 8-foot wide strip, or is this like, a 40 by 100 foot front yard that is really prominent in the neighborhood? I think could be some room for interpretation there. So it's not a hard no for me, but I don't know. I need to think about that a little bit.
It's 100% petroleum products, right?
The new one they put in at Monticello High School is bamboo. Is
Interesting.
the pellet rather than recycled tires.
Mhm.
The grass itself is still a rubber, a plastic of some sort.
I'd say Roger and I, as fathers of CHS athletes, probably have more of that field came home after games. I mean, that is just,
That smelled like rubber.
it just, it was just like, yeah, we
The new
used to.
bamboo stuff is great. It doesn't get in your cleats like the rubber, and they also have like sand ones.
Okay.
So
Because I think it doesn't wear well. It's great the first couple of years. The field at Charlottesville is it's all pushed down one way. It's I don't even know. Well, you probably haven't seen it in a couple of years. It's just terrible. And I mean, it hasn't stood up. It takes so much. So it would really be a product that. So I don't know. That was my sort of first thought is it'll look good for the first couple of years, and then it just looks beat up and worn. But all right. Interesting. So if I can sum it up then, maybe some research on the product, the location, sort of the context that it's in. I think to say as a front yard of a fraternity on Rugby Road, going up to the house, we're not interested. But as far as elements of a landscape, maybe there's some ideas there. So is
I
that-
guess would the alternative become, we'd like to put in a brick patio all the way across our front lawn?
I mean,
isn't
it's better than
necessarily
dirt. I don't know why they don't get the honey dust like, that you have it on grounds.
Which we don't like.
But, yeah. A place for the beer to soak in. I like that. All right, that's helpful. So I will encourage some creative thinking but not a front yard, but some creative integration we might consider. So next thing on the agenda, I had informal discussion of windows. I'm Xing that because we'll save it for another day. I did have a meeting. We had a meeting scheduled for tomorrow evening in this room about the National Register nomination. The draft has been completed, and we were going to be presenting that to the community. A little bit of a snafu on the notification and DHR and who was on first, and nobody was. So we're going to bump that meeting to a later date. So anybody out there that's watching, there will be no meeting tomorrow night. on April 19th regarding the Downtown Mall nomination, and I was just let you all know. The second thing, and let me share my screen if I can figure out how to do it. Why can't it? Why won't it let me? I know. Here I am. City now. Ta-da. Okay. So I'm going to open this one. Thank you for your patience.
Well, while you're doing that,
Yeah.
maybe I'll give a brief summary of. There have been 2 meetings of the Downtown Mall Committee. There's been
Go ahead.
underway, and Jeff attends those, and I do as well at the appointment that you guys so graciously gave me.
That's not what-
The first 2 meetings have dealt with getting a historical background, a shared historic background of the mall itself, the prehistory and the initial decision to have the mall designed. And then last week and a half ago, Beth Meyer gave a history of the design process itself and a lot of the design thinking behind the Halpern design. And it was helpful. While that's I still learn something about that every time I hear it, but it was definitely helpful to get everyone in the group, which is 20 to 25 people, a bit of a shared history. And so I think that's been the groundwork. We have not gotten to the point of making specific recommendations, but I'll try to keep you abreast as it continues.
So then I had circulated a letter that hopefully the BAR will agree to sign. We are, as you know, a certified local government, and I'll explain later what that means, but it makes the city eligible for certain federal and state-funded grant requests. And prior to COVID, we'd been, a lot of the work that we did, we were able to split using grant funding. So I think over the last 10 years, we've, I think for every city dollar, we spent something like 80 cents in grant funding. So we've taken, for the work we've done with grants, we've got a really good, value out of that program. So this year, I requested 2 grants, and I'll explain them. The first one was a lot of people don't realize, McKee Block, that's where the Jackson statue used to be, just to the west of the county courthouse. When we did the archaeology up here at the Levy site for Swan Tavern, we realized that the foundation of the 1890s house that was knocked down in the 80s was right there. So, and there's a brick wall that goes around the Levy block, same thing that goes around over there at McKee Block. So we'd always wondered what was the elevation? Had it been raised up? And what we found at Levy site suggests maybe the McKee Block foundation is right there. And so what we did, and let me go to just some of the images real quick. And actually, this is, if you can see, this is at the bottom. This is from the Swan Tavern's Levy site. So this is that footprint of the 1890s building. You see, and it's only like about 6 inches below the surface. So the Levy site, McKee Block site, so this would have been, that's where the Jackson statue was, and you can see this is where the Levy Block was. Primarily 4 buildings, 1, 2, 3, and 4 that were there from the early 1800s up until about 1915, 1916. And what we, just you can see from the, so you can see today, this is looking back across the park, and you can get an idea of what McKee Block looked like. So this is a small request. It's only a $10,000 project, asking the state for 5, we'll fund 5, and to try to do ground penetrating radar, just determine if any of the footprints are there. If there's anything extant there that we would want to take into consideration when we have the plan redesign of the park, which will come at some point in time. Work with Ben Ford, same as when we did the stuff at Penn Park. Might do some minor excavation just to sort of fact check some things, but that's that request to the state. And then the other one, let's see if it, yeah, good. The other request, and you all have been following, I know I've sent you pictures of what's going on at the Swan Tavern, Levy's, I've been calling it Swan Tavern Archaeological Site. There's the Levy building, and you can see the existing annex. So this is all coming down, and the new courts that you all approved the design for. But requirement of the demolition back in 2021 was an archaeological examination of the site. Typically, a phase 1 would be sort of shovel pits at intervals, but because of the report of burials on the site, that's why you see the more extensive clearing than typically. But the advantage in that is it's revealed a lot more up there than anybody had nobody anticipated what has been found. This is essentially the footprint of the Swan Tavern is underneath where Redland Club is, but we know from, and I think I have an image in here, excuse me for scrolling too fast, but we know that we know where Swan Tavern was. We know that there were buildings associated with it, but they're finding a lot more there than just bits and pieces of glass. I mean, this is one of the archaeologists put it so much better than I can, but this is a site that's probably dating the 1750s, 1760s, 1770s, the earliest, and into the early 1800s. It's very likely that one of the structures is associated with a dwelling, and most likely that of enslaved individuals. So the finding of personal items there, the ceramics, a lot of animal material, faunal material, as I'll say, bones, shells, things. So there's a story to be told at this site. And while the county funded the archaeological work as part of the project, the need to evaluate the materials is the next step, and that would be a really detailed evaluation of the artifacts. At Ben Ford, I've been working with the in-depth analysis, is what he said. So this grant request is for $10,000 to match $10,000 from the city for $20,000 in-depth analysis of the artifacts. It's probably, in fact, not probably, we know that 20,000 is insufficient, but it's sort of the max where I am with procurement. But it does allow us to get the ball rolling to do that evaluation. So I think, and again, it was all in there. The stuff they're pulling out of, it's pretty neat. You've seen the photos. And so all I'm asking from the BAR is, would you agree to let Mr. Gastinger sign off on a letter of recommendation for support of these grants? So you have any questions on that? But it would probably just take a motion to say, the BAR approves the letter of support. I don't know.
Anybody have any reservations? I think we've all been watching that project with a lot of interest and really pleased that it was an outcome of the design process that came through this board. So thank you for the update. Yeah.
Just confirming there are no graves.
Not yet.
None have been located. My gut tells me they're there. They just haven't, it's not where they've looked yet. It's possibly they're right in the disturbed area near the annex.
It could be under the annex.
Yeah, it's
You
possible.
know, I guess the story is it's behind the Swan Tavern.
I know.
It could be 50 yards away. Like, I don't know if you can go to that map that you had earlier.
I'll go up and don't get car sick.
I visited the site and talked to the archaeologist. It was pretty interesting.
This is what a grant request looks like. It's, sorry.
So, what they explained to me was that the Swan Tavern here would have actually faced onto what's now Jefferson Street, and that the records show that there was like a lean-to shed structure all along the back of it. And so what you're seeing here are in-ground pits, or sometimes called root cellars, which oftentimes, would have been associated with enslaved dwelling units. And so you can almost start to see sort of individual rooms or something like that across the back there. It's just an early way of preserving, originally it came from literally root cellar, right? You would preserve potatoes and things like that, onions, whatnot, down in the earth where it's cooler. And eventually it transitioned into a secure space where personal items could have been stored. Probably not like lockable per se, but you would know if somebody rifled through there and went in your stuff. And so I don't know if they found lots and lots of artifacts in there, but anyways, that's kind of a visual way to kind of understand where the enslaved population may have been occupying that space.
Yeah, what's interesting too is that, you remember, this is like this is Charlottesville day one. I mean, it really is, that's what's extraordinary about it. And that it's intact in the sense that you have Swan Tavern located here. You can see the light blue, that's roughly the footprint. Then there's that shed roof rear. There's also like a structure that was here. We found, I keep saying we, collectively, they found this small structure here, which had a brick floor and a cellar being anything underneath the floor, not on the ground, but not a basement. There's a structure up here which has been hard to discern, and then there was a stable barn shed described in early insurance documents, and that's that red structure, roughly 10 by 20, it's extraordinary what's come out of it. It's thousands and thousands of items, and it's personal items. It's not, just broken pottery and glass. There are, and again, the preparation of the animals, the food, the butchering. It was pretty wild. They're like, oh yeah, this is a pig tooth. This is this. This is that. Here's a pipe. Here's a bead. Here's hat pins. So there are domestic items there, and what's really needed is to sort of take, instead of a phase one, which would say we found a lot of stuff here from the early or the middle to late 1700s to early 1800s, is to begin to evaluate it and put the pieces together. And I think hopefully it's going to lead to a lot more research that can be done on this. But that's what the goal is. I know that I think they're going to be working there this week and next, probably going to be wrapping up soon. But this will be the next phase in all of this. And, I'll just say here, the county was, the city-county arrangement, the county's got the lead on this. They've been supportive of that work and what, has been necessary. I can't say enough thanks to Fraser Nyman and his folks up at Monticello. They've sent a small team down there that's been assisting, and also the Archaeologist Association in the state. I'm not sure what it is. There have been volunteers that have come in from other parts of the state and contributed their time. So it's been a really interesting site, but it is to my knowledge, nothing like this has ever been evaluated in Charlottesville. There's nothing this old at UVA, certainly. And they may have, looked up, something like this up on the mountain. But as far as within the city of Charlottesville, a site like this, I'm not aware of anything like this ever being evaluated. So that's that. So any questions about the letter, though?
Someone want to make a motion?
Sure. I move that the Charlottesville Board of Architectural Review allow our chair to sign a letter of support for CLG grant requests for the GPR survey and archaeological assessment of the McKee Block and an in-depth analysis of ceramic, faunal, and personal item artifacts recovered at the Swan Tavern archaeological site.
Here a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
All right, good. I'll take care of that. All right, so the next up, I wanted to, we have coming up, this is our roster. So 4 of you are, at the end of this year, are up for renomination if you wish, or reappointment. We know, Kevin and Roger are both completing terms of some prior individuals. That's why it's the abbreviated time. But wanted to just put that out there that the 4 of you can apply again if you would like to. I know it's a long way away, but we know time flies, and I don't want to get to October of next year and we're suddenly scrambling and spend 6 months, short-handed. So if you're interested, you can talk amongst, let everybody know, or if not, we can start to do some recruiting, because we do appoint positions by a particular expertise. Mr. Gastringer is up in a year and a half, so but he is not eligible, so be thinking about someone in that landscape architect position. So, there's a year and a half to beat the bushes, and then the other 4, you all have some time left and can be reappointed. So I wanted to just put that out there so we don't forget. And then, as I mentioned, we are a certified local government. That is a federal and state program, and in order to be a CLG, the requirements are we have historic ordinance, historic districts, we establish a review board, you all. So we've done all of the things, and we continue to do the things that are required. The annual report I have to prepare. We continue to survey things, we just, talked about some spending on that. But the reason I have it up here is because one of the requirements is that you all have to have some amount of training. And I know in the past they've had where I think the city attorneys come and talked about historic preservation or different things, and then this is just a list of from I think 2 years ago, some of the things people have turned in. And you all, most of you have professional learning requirements, so those work. But just want to put it out there that it does. I've had a couple of years where we've had quite a few BAR members with, nothing to fill in the blanks. Fortunately, there's been some that have taken 20 hours of stuff, so it can kind of hide you in the back. But really want to urge you to, even if it's to, just do get that training, talk to me about it. It's part of our requirement as for being a certified local government, and so that's my plug on that. As I just mentioned, we have you all are appointed by the criteria we have. We have 9 members, and we are in the process of the zoning rewrite, and that allows us some, not entirely, but we have some opportunities to address some of the administrative stuff. So if there are things that we could, the zoning revision is not intended to be a rewrite of everything. It's really getting at the land form, built form. But there are you all are one of the four key bodies in the city, so, you know, you are governed by the city code. So, for example, there's a provision in there, we have a licensed landscape architect or a licensed contractor. I think we would all agree that it'd be great to have both, but certainly I don't see them as interchangeable. And I'm putting this out here for you all just to sort of get you thinking. I think at some point we might need to have a longer work session discussion about this, but these are the kind of things where I'm in the process of, I have an opportunity to insert some things into the discussion, and so it's, if you all have any thoughts, send them my way, kind of thing. The other night, I texted Breck and Carl, and I said, all right, what are quickly some of the things that I deal with all the time, just, you know, like the stuff that's routine, and so it is just sort of helps me think things through. But there's also, we have a provision that all appointees shall be residents of the city. I know sometimes people, or at times people have said, well, what if, you know, do the historians have to be city residents? Or, you know, what is that really important? Is that, you know, is it okay if someone is a historian but they live in the county? So something for you all to think about.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Is this makeup the city's discretion, or is this the state CLG?
I'm sorry, this is,
definition?
so, this is the city code.
Okay.
So 30, yeah, so, and it's where, I mean, obviously paraphrase a little bit, but that's what the code requires, and then there is the provision, all appointees shall be residents of the city, so,
I'll just throw it there. I think it's been very valuable to have a landscape architect as a member of the BAR.
yeah.
And I don't know if there's a way to separate that or licensed contractor, but.
We've been working on that for, well, we've been talking about it for a while. You got my email that I sent, I think it was a month ago, to
Yes.
council.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we typically do have a landscape
We-
architect, but I just feel like
we-
it's almost, that could be a
Yeah,
standalone.
but it's been really helpful having a contractor on board for a lot of construction issues, and
The contractors, we've lucked out where the contractors had businesses in the design control districts.
Yes.
We lost Mike Ball because he moved his business out. So then we've yet to, it's hard to get a contractor who actually has a business in an ADC district.
Do they need to, this doesn't.
They don't, but because we
Suggest
have, I think
Right.
we've always felt like we have to have a landscape architect.
I agree.
I mean, since I've been on the board, I don't think we've ever not had a landscape architect, so that was the only way that we got the
Oh, I see.
contractors.
So, I see what you're saying. Gotcha.
I was proposing that we get rid of one of the architects in exchange for that, for a contractor.
see you later.
Well, I mean, just, just because it's have a construction knowledge. Or the other choice would be a business owner, but then, to me, it seems really important that we have a restaurateur as a business owner. And, yeah, so it's, you gotta, what are we willing to give up to get a contractor?
Well, I wonder if it could be expanded, if it would be architect, landscape architect, or contractor for, or, I guess it
For
would be
those
three.
those three positions.
I guess it would be, essentially be what you just said, except it'd give future boards a little more flexibility.
I think we're,
Yes.
well, so you got owner of business or commercial property in the design code district is 2. You could get that down to 1 and therefore have your a licensed contractor not have to live in a
Right.
control district.
Yes.
Or you know, you could add a member.
And you gotta have an odd number.
Okay. You're odd.
I mean, we could pick on the historians as well, but no.
Good. I also have construction experience.
You do.
I'm not sure I understand. The licensed contractor doesn't have to live in a design control district.
He doesn't, but that's the only way that we've gotten one.
Well, I know,
and
but
had
I'm just saying he
yeah.
doesn't have to. So
Right.
if you make that restriction, then all of a sudden you're going to have a narrower base of
Think-
people selecting.
I think the way it's written, it's saying landscape architect or contractor.
Right.
Right.
So if your contractor doesn't live in a historic district, then you lose.
No,
the
I
landscape
understand,
architect.
but if you try to squeeze them into the
Yeah.
owner of commercial business or property in a design control district, you'll have a smaller base of people to select among.
I think we're all in agreement on that.
Okay,
that,
then I
yes.
misunderstood what was being said, so.
There's a couple categories up here where there's two people that we have, and I guess the conversation is if we want one of those to be a professional contractor, we end up having to lose one of those. So we either will only have one architect and then a contractor who just happens to live in the city, or we have one business owner and a contractor.
No, I
who-
understand that.
So I think it's,
It's a Gordian knot. Yeah, I mean, it was great. Mike had that, he brought to the table that, well, here's what's practical, here's a product, or he had, knowledge of something. Yet I'll say, I mean, we've been very fortunate, most of you are architects, but to just look at and understand a project from the lens that we do have to look at it, it's invaluable to have the design professionals. I think I'd be hesitant to reduce those, but we don't have to answer tonight. It's just something I wanted to put out there to, that, maybe we need to have with things kind of opening up a little bit, maybe we need to have a mid-month work session. Sorry, I just got disconnected.
Can I ask, because I've just never really understood how the planning commissioner representative works? Does the planning commission vote one of the members to be the BAR representative, or how does that work?
the chair appointed me,
The chair appointed you.
yeah.
And would the representative from the planning commission ever not be one of those other categories anyway?
Yeah, you could have someone who just happens to live in the city,
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't fit in any of these categories.
Okay.
There's actually quite a few of us. that,
Yeah, okay.
I mean, you could get rid of your planning commissioner member as well, but that's,
No, we need a representation on the
Yeah,
planning
that's-
commission.
it's kind of nice to have someone to
Okay.
remind Rory that we're not the,
Right.
the
Right.
evil force out there trying to defeat all development.
Yes.
Well,
Just being naive, is it possible just to change the ordinance and say "and contractor" as opposed to "or"?
It's a recommendation I could make, and that's what I think,
Okay, well, why not do that?
that's what I'd
Well,
like
that'd
to
That
give
would
us
add a
an,
board member to.
yeah, that would give us an
Add a
even
board
number.
member, why
Yeah.
not?
10 on the board.
I think it's value to have an odd number in case you need a
Ah.
tiebreaker.
Then you flip a coin.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know the intricacies of that, but the chance that we're all here on a given night is,
I mean,
yeah, that's very true.
Now you know that's gonna happen for.
Everything's trade-off, guys.
we did have, what was the
I mean, I
what was the
guess-
big one that we just had a
well,
tie on?
Honestly, this evening, before Kevin got here, we had an even number,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And we were all evenly agreed.
We were, we
Yes.
were. Fortunately, it was a non-contentious agenda.
Yeah, there's challenges there. Well, it's food for thought. The other piece that, so you all know, is Carl is being on the planning commission. They are very involved in the zoning rewrite. So this is a discussion that not only am I hearing, but he's also hearing. And so he can work into his conversations with the planning commission, but it's not I think this needs to be worked, kind of maybe work through the permutations a little bit, but I do have the opportunity in the next month or two to take the code for the historic conservation districts, for the ADC districts and the IPPs, so there's 2 codes for that, and then, or the historic conservation district code, ADC district and IPP code, and there's also the entrance corridor code, which you guys aren't involved in, but to kind of evaluate, and I'll get to this in the next one, so we don't have to solve I just want to make sure we can have the discussion. And for example, one of the things that you all have duties and responsibilities that, one of them being develop a preservation plan. So a lot of, it's not maybe always obvious, but there's a lot of the preservation work, or for example, the CLG work and the surveys where I'm I get feedback from you all on that. I think it would be helpful to maybe have annually a more formal historic preservation plan that Molly and I are working on. I mean, not to the point of you saying, you know, walking tour maps and things. We have the historic preservation committee to do that, but evaluating IPPs, are there, you know, things, the things that you all can be doing as the BAR that are unique to the BAR. So I'll be sharing that with you just again, but this is sort of, again, BAR 101 for those of you new to the group. The one of the things that, and this was my question to Carl and Breck the other night, I'll go ahead, sorry, go ahead, if I can go ahead. Yeah, so we're working towards, this is a suggestion I had to the consultants. There's a lot of stuff that comes in, it's just simply an inquiry. People saying, hey, can I do this? Or what do you guys think of that? What do you think of artificial turf in the front yard? And there's times, you know, where someone will say, I want to repaint my house. It's now white. I'm going to paint it off-white. You know, yeah, do it. I put the $0 and the $100, $125 only up because that's what's on the applications now. That's more of a, that's not we're not discussing the numbers. It's just to sort of help explain that when I answer somebody's question, I'm not asking for an application and I'm not asking them to submit a fee. I'm kind of taking care of that informally, but still memorializing it. And then there's administrative approvals, which are you fill out a form, you write a check. For example, if someone is working with the state for rehabilitation tax credits, I can review that project administratively. And then, of course, there's the full BAR review. So what we have, though, in the ordinance, it doesn't, so it says administrative review. So there's that section, and then up here it talks about the following are exempt from requiring a COA and ordinary maintenance or repair of the exterior. And this is where, okay, what's ordinary maintenance and repair? When does ordinary maintenance repair, when does the balance, you know, shift to, oh, that has to go to the BAR, or, oh, you have to write me a $100 check so I can say yes. And so, for example, if someone has an asphalt shingle roof and they're in a historic district and they're, you know, putting on a new layer, I wouldn't think I'd need to bring it to the BAR. Is that a $100 review? Or even someone that's got an old standing seam metal roof, if they're going to replace it in kind, is that, you know, those are two of them that I kind of, you know, Ron did some work on his house. It was like, you're fixing
We're
something.
still doing time-release construction.
So yes, and so I think, but what we want to get to is where that's a lot clearer. And sorry, I'm going to scroll back down again, so like administrative review. So it says the repainting of an existing building or structure a different color. I approve people painting their houses all the time by email or phone call. But this specifically says an administrative review, which is that $100 application. So that's what I'm trying to, it sounds like minutia, but because it's in the ordinance, if we get in an argument about something, legal's going to default to what does your ordinance say? And it's going to be, you know, oh, you let 15 people paint their front door a different color and didn't, you know, have them go to the BAR or didn't have them submit an application. So this is one of the things we want to clarify, and that's where you did this. So this is where I was talking to Breck and Carl about, like, okay, and this is not a perfect list, but it's where, you know, like a tree. People say, hey, I want to cut down my tree, or I want to plant a new tree, or, you know, my tree is dead, can I cut it down? Stuff like that, you know. I don't think we've ever approved someone's what do I have up there, mailbox or, their house numbers. So there's things that, this is just sort of that list I'm playing with in my head where we could kind of think about what are the things that, going back to that list of the three, what goes to the BAR, what can I review with an inquiry, and what can I review with a $100 administrative review. So I'm just asking you to put your thinking caps on, and should you guys, want to discuss this at length at the next meeting? Should we have a work session? What would be a good way to flesh this out?
I think we should help you with items to help you brainstorm, but this seems very much like how much time does it take you to review each one of these things, and that would determine which category it goes into.
I think what's odd is that it's like, that's why when I asked you guys, it's because it's just easier to not start with a blank sheet of paper. And when I sit down and go, okay, I've got to think of all the things, it's like,
Right.
I don't know why. It's just a mental block thing. So, yeah, at some point, it'd be great to sit down and just brainstorm. All right, what are the top 50 things that I've asked you and you guys have said, why are you asking? Like, you notice I have, tires swing on a tree. I've never asked you about one of those, but it's like, that does get to questions like, if somebody puts a swing set in their backyard, should it go to the, do you all have to see it?
Porch decking, that was one thing that came up once, that was kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big range here.
Oh, my God, yes, yeah.
If replacing windows and doors, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to I think we should be part of that decision.
It is where I think we're gonna, the most important thing I think in the guidelines we need to really, really look at is our door and window replacement. We're losing, we're getting where people don't know what to do, so they're just replacing it and not telling us, or they're just letting it, things kind of fall into disrepair. But, so again, not trying to ask you, I'll circulate this, and just want to, like, if you've got something comes to mind, it would help me just to think it through. And if you've got some suggestions on, again, we sit in the conference room and talk through all this, what's a good means to an end here to, or you can say, hey, Jeff, your staff, get it done.
I mean, I think there's, like, just an example that popped to my mind because you offered it up was like replacing a standing seam metal roof in kind. I'm actually getting ready to do that on a historic house that my brother and I own, and we applied for tax credits. They were very specific and said, nowadays they have these clip-on type standing seam roofs that have like a clip-on ridge cap.
Right. We don't allow.
It's not allowed, and I
Right.
didn't want it anyways, but like that's sort of one of those things that somebody not as familiar with historic buildings may not think about, and they say, well, it's a standing seam roof, like I thought this was gonna be just fine, So those are the types of like details where it is important, but if you've kind of, I don't know, got a list, a checklist, that might be okay.
I think generally that you and the other staff have done a really good job of deciding what should come before the BAR, and it's okay that we have items on the consent agenda. I think those are still generally projects that we should be aware of and have the opportunity to. So I wouldn't make that a goal, is to get rid of consent agenda items. In a city that's growing quickly and has some remarkably large projects that are ongoing, that we sometimes get pulled into the minutia, especially of window and roof details, that we probably could find a way to reduce the amount of time that we need to spend meeting time on that. And so if we could help, I think we usually have pretty clear guidance on that. And if it makes it easier to make that some administrative review, I could see that happening. You probably already knock out a lot of those that don't even make it to our meetings, but
Yeah, I do, and I joke with Molly, like, if I had the time to, every time I do it, to write down then I could create a list, but it's amazing how, just keeping track of what you do sometimes becomes difficult. But I need to, because for example, if someone changes their roof, and they'll say, I'm doing that, all right, what's the condition of the roof? What are you replacing it with, et cetera, half round gutter, et cetera, no roof cap. And then I apply that, I'll say, you can do it, and then here are the requirements that I want. I need to make sure that the code allows me, if it is that sort of an informal okay, that I still have some purview over that. Like, it can't be, oh, well, you told them they could do it over an email. That means they do whatever they want. So that's what I'm trying to make sure the code backs me up.
Sure.
When I make those, then I can apply conditions. So,
Well, we can't see what's in your email inbox, and we don't want to.
No.
So, I'm certainly happy to help you brainstorm. I think the quickest might be just to propose the changes that you think would help you do your job better, and we can discuss that.
I like that idea. So then, the next up is, and this, I think, is helpful for, give me 15 more minutes. And are the fountains on, did you say?
Yeah, they're on this week. They went off on Monday.
So, good things happening there. So, this is where, kind of germane to the mall committee discussion, and I will say that the mall committee's not making decisions. The idea is that 50 years ago, there was this idea to create the mall, and the results and sort of the evolution of it, and we're now looking at it again and not saying, looking at new thinking as it moves forward, as it changes, as it continues to evolve, what things are good, what things aren't, and to kind of give council a range of decision making. So, but the BAR still has design review purview over the mall, and it's, as an example, we've got places where the potted plants, look very nice, and then there's places where it's, an assortment of things. Not really anything in the guidelines about that. There are, it's just sort of a menagerie of things, and I think that one of the things that I know on the design guidelines will work towards updates, but I do think we need to take a look at the mall in the immediate and try to have at least some working, guidelines, like things like what we did with the lighting and the 3000K and dimmable, and this might be, I know, Carl, how many years now have we talked about a walk on the mall? But, and so, for example, the keg, or not the keg, the cow horse trough, right? Is that acceptable as a planter? And so there are things that aren't necessarily in the guidelines, but maybe they should be. We say everything should be silver or at least, metal or black, but we see things where the lights are held on with, a bracket. I'd be okay with that if it were spray painted black. Now, maybe you all don't think so, or I think zip ties should not be allowed, but maybe zip ties if they're black. So, these are the kind of little things that I get constant calls about. You can't see it here, but it's like a giant wad of electrical tape, and so that's the kind of thing where I think it would be helpful to say, no, you can't do this, and here's why. This is obviously something Mr. Fabio and I need to address. Don't touch the trees. And then I think the thing that's been on the list, I know, for a couple of months is but I get a lot of questions about catenary lights. This is what I say.
That's
no-
not a catenary light.
That is not. That is right. That is it's like a spider. Yeah, just sort of. So now, for example, umbrellas. We say one color. Well, maybe there are at least two different colors. Maybe that's okay. So again, these are the kind of the mall questions where I need to kind of walk them all and go good, bad. Should we let it happen or should it never happen? And then just to jump to the lights. So yeah, you've seen that where I would say cut that off short, but where is my, so I had something about, yeah, we like the rods, but do we, I don't like when they look bent, although that's just me. You all might say, who cares? So, but where I've come down is, to me, these are not acceptable, and I think the next picture, these are.
I kind of love what's outside the whiskey jar. They have colored lights, but it's like really tasteful.
Okay. You'd like
It's
that?
Not the rat nest that we saw.
No, that's the Babadero's little package, but in front of the whiskey jar, they've had colored lights out there for a long time, and it just looks really kind of magic.
So this is what I've been meaning to bring to you guys for some decision making, and I'm just introducing it tonight because we have a short agenda, but I need to add it as kind of an action with a sort of a formal, what do you, yes, no, go through it, and then I know, then at least I have a policy that I can fall back on. It's not me just saying I think the BAR, yes or no. And then the last one is that I'm getting questions about shading, and umbrellas are difficult to deal with particularly on the side streets because they take a lot of wind. What Jack Brown's, for example, asked what kind of sunscreens, shading, and I didn't give an answer, but I started to say, if it goes up during the day and it comes down at the end of the day, there's a lot of opportunities, but it's the thing that starts to go up and stays up all day. Definitely, I would say nothing connected to the building. I mean, we're really talking something standalone, but I don't know. It's something to give some thought to, and I don't know if you all have any strong opinions, because I do have 2 requests in right now for what can we put up. So I'll ask you informally if you have any thoughts on that, but otherwise, that's all I have. That's all I have on my list, just said to give you an overview. So thoughts on sunshades? Mr. Business Owner?
Well, I got a few thoughts.
That's why you're
Yeah.
here. There you go.
So, it's a gray area, right? You don't want to put restrictions, like, okay, yeah, that looks great, but again, you don't want it all to look the same, right? Because then what's the difference between your spot and your spot and your spot? You would hope that you'd put it in the owner of the business's hands to make sure, hey, let's make sure this looks good. So unfortunately, I think it's almost on a case-by-case basis, and to have guidelines is kind of tough because you want people to be able to do what they want with their space within reason, right? But
Well, I differ with that. We'll keep going.
and I probably agree with what you agree with if I'm thinking what you're thinking. But
If it's your building.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So you almost want to put it in the public's hand. I mean, when I say that to a business owner, which is scary at times, and that's why we're here, so that people don't do something that, takes away from what we're trying to do as a feel for the downtown mall. Now, this might not be popular, but it's really hard to go to a business owner and say, hey, that electrical tape you got right there? That looks terrible. Well, he could point at about 9 other things on the mall that the city hasn't done. So, sorry. You know, so that's the reality of it, you know? So I think that's where you're at. It's hard to go to somebody when when your kitchen isn't clean to go yell at someone else's kitchen. Sorry.
Right.
So,
That's well said.
you know, there's a lot of problems on the mall, you know, and it doesn't necessarily mean all aesthetic either. So you're going to deal with a lot of emotion with that type of stuff. Now, if they want to put up a pink sunscreen that looks terrible, well, no. You know, that's when someone needs to step in and say, hey, that's not a good idea. But if it's functional and it's something that they can afford that makes it look good and they can use it, I'm all for it. You know, you got to be pro-business with that, within reason, is my stand on stuff like this. Now, you would hope that a business owner or whoever they are as far as a GM or whoever's working that store, whatever store it is, whether it's a restaurant or whatever, takes some pride, you know? And I know that's kind of a foreign thing sometimes, but you take some pride and say, hey, this looks terrible. Let's not do this. So it's tough because it's an individual thing, but yet you don't want it to be an individual thing necessarily. So I think maybe...
Yeah, we probably don't disagree that much, but the thing that I just have in mind, and certainly is a theme that's been discussed at the mall committee meetings, it's just remembering that the mall is a public space, belongs to the city of Charlottesville, to its citizens, and there's been a lot of consternation about the overall privatization of some of these spaces. That being said, everyone wants to support the business community and the vitality that they bring to the mall. Those are things go hand in hand. My personal feeling is that the business community might welcome a little bit more clarity about how to do this, or even that some of these elements are actually owned by and managed by the city, so that there is some consistency, whether it's the ABC fences or some of the furniture or lighting. Those are some things that I think could use some standardization, maybe there are some, it's a subtle way to maybe reduce the amount of elements or the variety of elements so that it feels like the mall belongs to everyone. I can't imagine that there would be a push for some way to customize something that just differentiate, and whether it's the awnings or the umbrellas or a particular maybe there's a common planter, but a different people could plant them in different ways. There could certainly be a way of simplifying the number of elements that are on the mall, give some customization, but still have it be visually cleaner so that it feels like it still is a common shared space.
I think the difficult thing is that the mall, the evolution of the cafe spaces had been a lot less than they were. They were up only a certain point of the year, and then everything was removed, and they've become somewhat of they're a space that's leased from the mall, but they've become almost like year-round storage places.
Right.
It's wintertime, well, all this stuff's still there, everything, they used to be removed in that off-season. That's a city enforcement issue.
Yeah.
That's a really good point about what we don't do.
And I agree with you. I think there needs, and that's why I say it's a gray area, because there should be some guidelines, but I do still think there needs to be room for that individual process. Because, here's the thing, maybe Jack Brown's, I don't know their money situation, and I think we need to look at that. I think that's part of like what we're talking about with having a contractor. You got to look at those things, and those are part of the business, and saying, hey, this is what we can afford. Does this work? All right, it doesn't. Well, what about this? And be able to have those options for those business owners to come in and not just saying, you got to go with this or not. Hey, yes, we strongly suggest this, but then what else are you bringing? So I don't mean to talk out of both sides of my mouth with that, but I think there's just got to be that kind of asterisk, unfortunately, and I think that's why we're here, is to kind of guide people and saying, no, we don't want that sign up, or let's go this way and kind of do it within the guidelines, you know? But I think it's important to have that asterisk a little bit and have that option of, you know, not being so black and white, where
Right.
people can kind of bring it forward and we can discuss it.
Yeah, we get that a lot, is that everybody wants sort of the same playing field, and,
Yeah.
but they are, enforcement's a problem, because things kind of, yeah, if we start at one end of the mall and walked, it would be, we'd have to change an awful lot. But that's where, like, the first question was like, okay, should we even be raising hell about this? You know, do I care if the planters are different colors? The guidelines say so, but maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe some things need to be updated. But it's really interesting that sometimes the question, you think you've anticipated every permutation, and someone will ask, and I'll be like, you know, I no idea, you know, and because it's on me. I have a lot of administrative say on the mall, and sometimes I just don't know what to say. And they said the shading thing's going to be a big one, and so I don't know if you've got anything neat you've used. Send it my way.
Yeah, that's a tough space there.
It's just-
with that, especially with the, like you said, it's a wind tunnel. Umbrellas stink. They're
Yeah.
they're not fun to deal with. But it's, you know, you don't get in the restaurant industry because it's easy. So,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, you figure it out and you make it work. But you hope that, like, you hope owners are gonna pick something that looks nice and that they don't. I think one of the pictures of one of my places were there, and the pot, you know, looks, there was rain in it, I think, or something. So, like, there needs to be, there's also accountability with that as well.
Yeah, we've had, I mean, sometimes the signage where, you know, someone's taped signs to their poles, or that we had political signs, you know. What's the fake plants, you know, that's an easy one. But this is helpful, and I think, I said, I need to put it together into something really precise, not
Yeah.
to get, you know, restrictive, but to say, here are really the things people have asked me, where are we? And, but I just wanted to share that, because I know I've had on the list mall lights for so long that I was obligated to show you something sooner or later, so.
Is there I guess question, is there a downtown mall, like, merchants association? Okay.
There is,
I
in
mean, I think
fact,
that's one mechanism where they can work together and all kind of come to a communal agreement on, like, on that side of the fence of, you know, here's things, hey, I'm gonna hold you to a standard, you hold me to a standard type of thing. I think that the balance is finding a way to let the business owners have their individuality, but recognizing that the common thread is that they're all in the downtown mall. You know, and I think something that everybody would appreciate is quality.
Yep,
Right?
yep.
And, you know, the Christmas lights look pretty cheap. Like, I think, you know, that's an easy way to lop off some of the junk, right?
this is helpful. I do know one that might be coming your way, and I think I had mentioned this maybe a year ago, but some of the old phantom signs, people have asked about restoring them. And the ordinance says you can restore an old sign if if it's for a business that's still in that location. You know, that's their sign, they can restore it. But the question, for example, of the Coke sign that's on the wall opposite the unfinished building. And so the first question is it a sign or not? You know, is it, if it's a sign, but then.
There's got to be some guidance from from the Secretary of Interior Standards or Historic
It was
Preservation
some-
about.
Are you talking
what-
about, like, the
are you-
old painted on the?
Yeah.
There's one kind of by where you're at on Main Street, the steakhouse.
Yep, yep.
I think that is one of the coolest things, like.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
I just think I love that stuff around town. I think
So-
it's really neat.
No-
Coolest signs, I mean, it's definitely advertisement, but they're pretty.
Well, the,
question, is it a matter of preserving something that's there, or like restoring it and like repainting it so it's a new Coke sign?
that's where I'm stuck, particularly when, yeah.
Right,
Yeah. If it's
or it might be like
restoring-
faux restoring it, so it's kind of more legible but not new.
Particularly when,
city,
Yeah.
Coke
You have to pay, you have to pay Coke, or do they have to pay you?
well, when Coca-Cola has a program restoring signs around the country, that's where it gets, so to me, where I've been with this is, it's a sign and you're repainting it. And that is, for not a business, it's there. But what I've encouraged, the downtown group and, is really had some neat ideas about doing things. And my suggestion was, well, what about, or actually Robert Watkins suggested, projecting an image on the sign of what, something new. And there are other ghost signs around town, you could do that. So it's illuminating what it used to look like, but it's not altering that. But I asked DHR, and they were actually, they've sort of gotten torn on that, because there's been, again, that sort of business investment in sort of the revitalization and things, and so there's no solid answer. But my feeling is it's fake, history. But it may be coming to you, so give it some thought, because the guidelines don't really, it's like with that cow where
We
we
got
treated
bait
as,
and switched on the dairy market.
When's it a sign and when's it a mural?
yeah. So it was,
I grew up in Roanoke, and some of the old ads are some of the most important part of downtown Roanoke. The old Dr. Pepper sign and the "You Need a Biscuit" ad that's like 4 stories tall. Like, I think they add a lot of character to a downtown, and at the point that they've been there for so long that it's like part of the fabric.
removal's not ideal, but you can't touch it up so it looks, when do you cross the line to, it looks just like a new sign? Or do you leave it alone? I don't know. So there's your homework, lots of it. Guys, thank you. David Timmerman, I know, had something came up, same with Sherry. And I think those are the only 2 we're missing. So, yes, sir.
Just a heads up, so we've got module 2 out, and I guess we sort of started this conversation in the other room. Jeff, you seem a little worried about how the zoning rewrite's gonna affect our duties on the BAR. I'm not worried, so if anybody else is worried, maybe try to convince me or help me figure out why I should be worried. Because it's, to me, we're an overlay, and we just keep doing our job, no matter what the zoning says. I mean, I get the thing about some of if the setbacks are a little weird, I get that, but other than that, I'm not worried about downtown being zoned for 10 stories. That doesn't scare me at all.
Right.
But if I should be, somebody help me out with this, because I'm not gonna be much of an advocate otherwise.
I think it's as I said, the downtown West Main, it's the question's primarily when we start to see things go up above the existing buildings, how do you distinguish, as the facade continues, should it step back, what? So I'm not that concerned about there. What I'm thinking about are some of these residential districts where we have, traditionally looked at what is the typical spacing, what's the typical distance from the street, sort of over, how does that new building fit onto that street of all those other buildings? And if it's, the rules say, no, we want it, a 5-foot setback, and, so imagine Rugby Road, for example, something that's right up to the street and 5 stories, that significantly alters that character.
I get that, and I guess maybe we need to make sure, or I can try and make sure in our work session that, council, is that what you're thinking? Are you thinking that
It's called a
you
Jeff
want to
in my house.
allow houses up to the curb on Rugby, or do you
Thanks.
want to allow the BAR to pull them back to line up with what's currently there?
Well, I think the
And I
question.
can
Well, that
ask
might
in
be
the work
even
session.
trickier in the conservation districts where we have less
Yeah.
to go on, and the contrast might be more stark. I think that could be a real trick.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's more the
I
question
can bring those up.
of, have the discussion of, because if the intent is that regardless of the existing fabric of that street or block, we're building, you know, up to the, then let us know, so that we're not, you know, we gotta adjust the guidelines and things accordingly. There's no point in even having discussion if it's not
Yeah.
gonna be,
Yeah.
you know, and I mean, just like with the slate roof and the solar panels, I gotta do some digging on it. What exactly did council's decision do? Because we have other slate buildings. I have one, in fact, that I have to follow up on, that people want to put solar panel on slate. Should I even bring it to the BAR? So that's kind of the context is, worried's not the right word. I just want to make sure that we know, if the BAR is not going to have a job in certain decisions and certain things, then establish that. But just to say, oh yeah, the BAR is going to say it, then they can appeal, what's the point?
And that's kind of why I'm asking, so that my work session is next week, next Tuesday. So if there are other items, I can bring them up for discussion. And I know there's a sensitive ear to, council is sensitive to it, and we do have planning commissioners that are very sensitive to historic preservation. So just knowing what we're getting into, because I think some of us just don't know. Like I wasn't thinking of some of these things.
I mean, one of the things I raised, we talk about the front of buildings, particularly in West Main. But you don't, so there's that sort of, what's happening on West Main, north or south? Yeah, and on the south side, yeah, it faces a railroad track, so it's just, yeah, but that's still what someone else sees. Certainly on the north side, where that grade just drops after 100 feet or so off of West Main, or a couple hundred feet, like back by Wurtland. And so, but what is the back of that building? And it's where I've said, well, you know, this is why the BAR does look at all four sides, because that back matters. But some of the ideas are, all right, how are those places defined such that, and not to conflict with the BAR, but where it actually is helping the BAR. It's strengthening the BAR's position about that design. You know, when people say, well, what do you care about the back of the building? Well, we care because, you know, we want that to be treated in a certain way. So it's not just digging our heels in, it's also saying, what are some things BAR does that, you know, like the spacing, you know, where you got, you know, a 500-foot building, maybe there should be spacing in there, so to make sure that that's codified to assist the BAR.
That is codified,
Yeah.
for sure.
Does that make sense?
We've got some good stuff in the code that does do that. To the point that I was getting a little worried that it would overrule us, that there's gonna be some regimented stuff about how wide a building facade can be, and how it has to be modulated and broken up, and how much, you know, percentage of glazing there has to be, things like that, which I think they're all good things. And my concern was just, well, what if someone has some like really good idea that doesn't match that? Or, you know, always like when Tim Moore was here, well, make this part of the building lower and make this part of the building taller, and he always wanted to go over what the height limit was. So it's kind of, you know, stuff like that.
Are there many IPPs on Preston?
Is there what?
IPPs on Preston Avenue?
The
There's a
Coke
couple.
building,
King Warehouse?
Yes.
Dairy Central, or Dairy,
Yeah.
and the
Prestige,
Rock
Prestige
House.
I guess that's greedy, but yeah.
Mhm. And the new church, well, the church that was designated, so yeah. Silk Mill is an IPP.
I could just imagine Preston being a spot where there's going to be a tremendous amount of the bigger lots, pressure to go up, and impacts on adjacent neighborhoods. We don't have any say in that, but unless they're IPPs.
Right. Well, the IPP status usually doesn't extend all the way back to the neighborhood. At least it didn't with the dairy. I know my neighborhood has thought about that. I mean, that is my backyard.
Yeah.
Actually, but no.
Right.
It's no, that's true. And that has been Counselor Payne has brought that up a couple times, worried about some of the heights allowed on Preston. Again, I'm no help, because I'm like, make it taller, and just deal with what happens behind, like, do a bulk plate or something, but, anyways. It's a good discussion.
All right, so get comments to Carl by Tuesday, if you have them. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Anybody
Second.
opposed? You can stick around.
Just keep playing with it.